Mr. Samuel Khan.
Thank you so much.
Good.
Great, thank you. Can you guys hear me good? Yes. Great, okay, awesome. We'll get started. So thanks for the introduction. To get started, basically this presentation is about my journey and my team's journey in implementing a multi-touch marketing attribution technology. As he said, my name is Samir Khan. I am currently responsible for running the marketing analytics operations for a company called Direct Energy. For those in Houston might be familiar with them. My previous company, which basically this case study is based off, I've been here only like 2 weeks, but this case study is based off of my previous company and the team that I built and the multi-touch attribution platform that I built. So this is how the agenda is going to look like. So first we're going to talk about our journey, the challenges that we run into. So one of the major challenges that we run into in my previous organization was identifying the right type of framework, because that's always a question when marketers have is they want to go achieve something, achieve a goal, a business objective. The way I approach things is I look at from a framework standpoint. So I always suggest and recommend developing framework. We're going to look at a couple of different frameworks today for implementing a multi-touch attribution platform. Then we're going to talk about the architecture of the technology that we implemented, how it looks like, what are the mechanics, how is it connected to Salesforce and other parts of the business, businesses. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the myths and misconceptions that we had in our organizations and how we were able to overcome them. So today, if there's one idea, one thought that I want to leave you guys with is that attribution is a journey. It's not a snapshot of when the conversion happens. Neither it is a snapshot of when your first interaction with the customers happen. In fact, it is a series of events that happen over the time of the customer's journey, right from the first interaction all the way to the close one deal and beyond. Now, one thing I was going to ask you is, do you understand your customer's journey? Now think about it for a moment before you answer it. Do you really understand your customer's journey? What I have found out in my adventure with attribution is customer's journey is unique and specific to their needs, wants, and circumstances. And in fact, there's a milestone in the customer's journey after which everything's going to change. Now that reminds me of back in 1996. It was the first time I was leaving my parents' house to go to complete my undergrad engineering program. So my parents' house was about 2 hours from my college campus, so it was not feasible for me to commute daily, so I used to commute on a weekly basis. So I was kind of nervous and anxious, but at the same time I was excited as I was starting a new chapter in my life. So every day, we used to go from the university campus to the college dorm to grab lunch because the cafeteria in the dorm was paid for by my parents. So obviously it's free lunch, so I want to go there. So now, for going from the university campus to the dorm, there were two roads. One was the back road that went through a small town. I'm talking about India here. So this is a small town in rural India, and there was a back road that normally used to get filled with water during the monsoon season. And there was a front road, which connected the university to the college campus, and this was adjacent to a major freeway, and there was no separation between it. So it was kind of dangerous. So generally, we used to avoid that road. But this afternoon, I was hungry, and a couple of my friends, we said, okay, let's go grab some lunch, and it was raining pretty bad. And all of the back roads were filled with water. So we took the main freeway road, because we didn't have any choice, and we started walking, and we reached almost halfway down the road, and something hit me really hard from behind. And for a moment, I just lost track of time. I didn't know what was happening. And then I fell on the ground and I realized I've been a part of a major accident. So long story short, I went through multiple surgeries, lost a year of college, but that's not the point. The point is that milestone, that event, completely changed the way how I look at things, how I make my decisions. So before you decide on what marketing technologies you want to buy or build, it is important to understand that milestone in your customer's journey. And that could be an email that your customer receives and they start to interact with you in a completely different way. Or it could be an interaction with our qualification rep. Or it could be a website experience. It could be anything. But it's very important to identify those critical milestones. So does your customer's journey looks like this. It's a memorable experience. They're getting all the information they need. They're getting the documentation. The conversion experience is flawless. Or it looks like this. An accident about to happen. I can imagine how it feels falling down from a running horse. Horrible. Or even worse. Your customers are experiencing challenges one after the other to the point they just give up. They have problems on the website converting. They're talking to sales rep, they're not able to get hold of the right person. Once they get hold of the right person, they're still not able to solve the problem to the point they just give up. We all have experienced this as a customer working with other companies, and so as our customers have well. So we have our problems as well. We had our problems, we had our challenges. And the reason why we had these types of challenges because of two main reasons. So let's talk about that. The number one reason was we were using a basic marketing attribution implementation framework. This is how it looked like. So we identified the objectives. The objective was ROI on marketing channel and credit allocation to the marketing channel. We all, from a marketing standpoint, struggle with it at times. Then we went to our stakeholders and said, hey, this is what we're trying to do. We have our digital analytics platform, so we used Adobe and Google Analytics. And this is what kind of attribution we can get from these platforms. And it's like, okay, let's go use what we have, and we're going to use a simple attribution framework and just go implement it. So we prepared a report, we created reports in Tableau, and started sharing the data. That was one part of the challenge. The second part of the challenge is in our organization, we had myths and misconceptions about things. And this is not the first time. Like, I've worked in different organizations. Every organization have assumptions, myths, and misconceptions that are not necessarily backed by data. And we had the same issue. So let's go look at some of these myths and misconceptions. The number one myth that we had, and some of you may relate to this, we had multiple attribution models. In fact, we have three. The first attribution model we had, which was our digital analytics attribution model that marketing uses, that you get out of from your digital analytics platform. Then we had a lead source attribution that was used by finance. So in the Salesforce, there's a field called lead source, and the finance said, we're not going to trust anything else apart from using Salesforce, and we're going to use lead source as a mechanism to identifying the ROI on marketing channels. The third attribution was used by our sales teams, which was based on the sales owner field in Salesforce. So basically assigning the compensation between a field sales, outbound team, inbound team, and partner. So they use the owner role on deciding where to attribute the deal to. The second myth that we had was we believed that every customer journey is consistent and the same. Again, we didn't have any data to prove otherwise. So that was a myth that we consistently had over a period of time. The third myth that we had was that digital marketing is a funnel feeder. What it means is digital marketing is only effective at the top of the funnel. And after that, the digital marketing doesn't necessarily play any role. We did have our marketing automation platform, but because we didn't have any integration with our Salesforce instance, and we were not able to tie the journey of the visitors through the marketing automation, through the Salesforce to show like emails are effective in opportunity creation. The fourth myth, this in fact was not necessarily an assumption, it was based on data. So our organization, we believed that if we invest marketing dollars in this quarter, we're going to see results in the same quarter. And the reason was, in Salesforce, the time it takes from the creation of opportunity to close one deal was 60 days. So sales team used to come to us and say, hey, can you just invest marketing dollars? I'm running behind on my quota, and then we want to close it in this quarter. I was like, that's not how it works, but we don't have data to prove it. Last but not the least, we believe that the digital marketing analytics attribution that we get from our digital marketing platforms is sufficient enough for us. And the reason behind that, this is exactly what we got from our digital analytics platform, Google Analytics. If you go look at the conversion paths, in our case, this is what it shows. So typically your conversion is maximum two-channel journey, and it's between a PPC or organic search or a referral. So this is where we struggle. Okay, then why do we need an advanced multi-touch attribution platform? We didn't have the answers. So all of this was going on, and I said to my team, like, let's take a step back. Before we go in the market and find one of those 7,000 marketing technologies to solve our problems, let's take a step back. Maybe we don't have a technology problem. Maybe there's something else going on here. So we started researching, and we said, okay, maybe there's a problem with our framework. The current framework looks pretty simple for the size of our organization, and it's not solving the problem that we have. So we researched in the market. We found multiple different frameworks that are available. One we found that we really connected well was the Serious Decisions Marketing Technology Implementation Framework. And what we did is we didn't just took the framework and applied it right out of the box. We customized it to our needs, because every organization has a different needs and wants. So we took the framework, we customized it, we changed some of the stages of the process, and we applied it. So let's walk through some of the stages of this framework. So first is alignment. What that means is, once you identify your business objectives, it is very, very important to align those to the needs and wants of your internal stakeholders. Try to figure out, what are they trying to solve for? Maybe someone has already solved this problem in the organization. Maybe they have some ideas about it. So that's where you go into the alignment, and that also helps you prioritize your objectives, because there could be multiple objectives in a larger organization, even mid-sized organizations. So when you complete the alignment stage, the next phase is the requirements. In the requirements gathering phase, what you're doing is you're taking your business objectives and you're connecting the dots to functional capabilities. And I'll explain what that means. So let's take an example. Let's say if in your organization, you're trying to improve the conversion of marketing qualified leads to move it quickly to sales qualified lead, SQL. So going from MQL to SQL. Now there could be multiple levers you could pull. One is, first off, you want to understand what that conversion looks like. So you need a special types of reporting, maybe a technology that helps you measure the path from MQL to SQL. The other challenge could be maybe the reps that you hired for a qualification are not qualified enough to do the job. So it's a people problem. It was a technology problem, it's a people problem. The third part is a process. Maybe your process going from MQL to SQL is broken. Maybe you don't have the right types of steps in the process. Maybe you don't have the measurements in the process. So that's how you align the capabilities, and then you find out and say, okay, is it a technology problem? Is it a process problem? Or is it a people problem? So in our case, from an attribution standpoint, when we started looking at it, we didn't necessarily felt that it was a people problem. We had the right type of people, we had processes in place, but we were still not able to measure the attribution. So we decided that it is going to be focused on technology, so let's go there and started to do research in the market to see what types of providers are available in the market when it comes to multi-touch attribution. So we created an RFP, we went in the market, and we started looking at different providers, shortlisted a list of providers, came back to the business and made recommendations to the business in 3 providers that we were interested in going with. Finally, we got an approval for 1 provider that we went with. We did the implementation, and I'm going to talk about in the next slide how that looked like. And then now we're in the stage where we're governing that technology, because obviously once you implement the technology, it's very, very important to start maintaining it, upgrading it, and owning it. So this is how our marketing technology implementation framework looked like. So we went for the provider called Bizible with a B. Bizible just, in fact, got acquired by Marketo. So this is how they're connected. So we integrated Bizible to first our Salesforce instance. So any kind of data that we had in Salesforce, like our leads, contacts, opportunities, accounts, it automatically gets mapped to a touch point, which time and date stamping. Then Bizible also captures in the sales activity data. So we're currently using a technology called Outreach.io to manage all of our salesperson's activity. So let's say if they do an outbound phone call, they send an email to a prospect, they receive a phone call, all of that is being captured in Salesforce through Outreach.io in the activity record in Salesforce. And that is also a time and date stamp with the help of Bizible. Then we connect all of the digital touch points that we have on our website because we're using the Bizible JS script on the website. Then finally, we're capturing all of the marketing information using the UTM parameters. So all of these data coming from different sources is coming to this application, and it's getting processed, and it's getting time and date stamped to build the journey of the visitors. And then finally, we're outputting this data into our Redshift, Amazon Redshift data warehouse through a technology called Segment. So that's how our setup looked like. Let's talk about implementation. So from an implementation standpoint, we went through almost about a 6 to 8 months of implementation cycle. So initially, we started within our team, go to the digital marketing team and said, what are your challenges? We're doing this small experiment from a multi-touch attribution platform. We identified a couple of different areas. One was PPC. How do we improve the PPC performance? So we started working on that. And we launched it for our team instead of going broad. One thing that I did as a next step is I partnered with my peer in finance department, and that helped tremendously change the conversation in the organization. So as I remember, as I said before, finance was using a lead source Salesforce-based attribution model. I went to them and said, hey, why don't we start looking the attribution and ROI in a different lens and different perspective? Now that we had this multi-touch attribution platform, we should start to use this. And this was the very first time we were able to get a very accurate view of our attribution and our ROI in a very small basis, because we said, okay, let's go pick the data from the last 6 months and do an experiment and see what we get. And the finance guys were really impressed. So once they got on board, it was relatively easier for us to go and spread out across a larger data set. And then we presented this to our executive team, including our CEO. And then finally, salespeople are always a little bit skeptical when marketing comes out with a solution. So they caught up and they were on board as well. So it took us about 8 months to finally launch a company-wide attribution model. And this is the very first time in the history of my company that we were able to see revenue, sales, opportunity by different segments of the business. So we had a marketing segment, we had a field segment, which was field sales primarily, we had a partner segment, and then we had one segment, which is basically one of our largest partner. So we separated that out. And this is how our journey looks like. So I was saying before, we started with the digital marketing attribution for paid search. We saw significant improvement in our paid search performance with the help of the attribution. Then we added campaign attribution. So if you recall, Salesforce has a campaign functionality. All of the offline stuff that we were doing, like trade shows, events, webinars with third parties, they were all being sourcing data into Salesforce, but it was coming from a third party. There was no way for us to use a tag to capture that. But because now we had the capability of Visible to use Salesforce's campaign functionality, we were able to tie those data pieces to the online and digital touchpoints. Then we started capturing all the partner data. Partner data was coming from a completely different portal. We use a technology called InPartner, which is our PRC software, and that's where we capture all of our partner data. So we started date and time stamping all the partner campaigns to include into our attribution journey. And now where we are in the phase is we're doing a data warehouse project. So now that we had all of this data, we're not only interested in the marketing channel that is important for the performance, but also the session data. So we're trying to get into the session of the visitor, try to identify, okay, what type of content did they saw in the journey of the visitor that we should focus on and probably ask our creative team to go do more of. With this journey mapping exercise and multi-touch technology, we were able to completely shatter and bust the myths that we have in organizations. So let's walk through each one of these. So if you remember, the first myth that we had was we need multiple attribution models. Well, the reality is we don't need multiple attribution model. We need a steering committee. So this is how our steering committee looked like. We had people from the business stakeholders, which is sales and marketing stakeholders. We had our executive team. They were the approvers. We had operational folks, a group from each operations, including my teams, marketing operations, sales operations, and technology operations. Then we had the finance guys. So this is how we built our steering committee. And every single project that we do now goes through the steering committee first, even before it hits the IT approval processes. So what that does is allows us to be able to say, yes, this is a real challenge for us. We have segmented this into the 3 groups, which I mentioned, technology, process, and people. We have identified the right types of process. Do you think that this might be worthwhile effort for our organization to go to? And they say, no, that's not right. We have other priorities that we need to focus on. Let's go do that. So the steering committee is highly recommended to everyone who is doing any kind of projects in any organization. It doesn't have to be a big organization to have a steering committee. Even in a small startup, you can have a steering committee for a couple of people who decide on projects. So we were able to bust that myth. The second myth which we had, which is customer's journey is equal. Well, in reality, it's not. And this is an exact journey of few of our customers. It is much more complex than just coming to our website and filling out a form or purchasing a product. The customers go through multiple interactions with online and offline campaigns, and several occasions, multiple times. And because we were able to see this data in reality in Salesforce, we were able to create the reports, we were completely able to bust the myth that customer's journey is not equal. The next one, which was digital marketing is only effective at the top of the funnel. Now, because we're connecting the dots between the digital channels and the offline channels, we were able to show the value of digital marketing, not just bringing in the leads to the funnel, but also in the mid when an opportunity is being created, the effectiveness of the emails, the effectiveness of our content. And at the end, when users are interacting with their case studies, they're attending webinars just before the deal gets closed, that has also become powerful. One of the things that we consistently observed that, especially at trade show and events, they were very effective after the opportunity was created, before the deal was closed, because the conversation that the sales rep had at these events on a one-on-one basis, which we were not able to prove before, we were able to do now. So we proved that the efforts that we're doing from a marketing and digital marketing standpoint were very fruitful across the journey of the visitors. The next one was that a typical journey, in our case, it takes 60 days from opportunity creation to close. Now that was the Salesforce insight. Remember, now we're able to map all the way from the first interaction to close one deal. We found out the average journey of the visitor is about 135 days. So we went to our sales reps and said, hey, we want to help you, but give us more time. We're not going to be able to spend money in the same quarter and produce results in the same quarter. It's going to take us about at least 5 or 6 months to show you the benefits and return on investment on these marketing dollars that we're doing and investing right now. So we busted that myth. And then the final one, we had this big debate in the organization. Now, we were at a point that we were about to significantly drop the spend on our offline marketing efforts, mainly our trade shows and events. We used to do a lot of them. Apart from the direct deals that are generated from these trade show and events, we were not able to prove the value of them. So the straight call was, any event that's producing an opportunity, keep them, everything else should be cut. Because of the journey mapping exercise, we were able to show the effectiveness and the influence, a direct influence of these events on opportunities. Almost 30% of all digital marketing deals had an offline touch points. We were completely able to shatter the belief that cutting the spend significantly on trade show and events makes more sense. That's pretty much our journey and story. I would open up for questions.
Other than Visible, did you look at anyone else? Look at Full Circle?
Full Circle Insights. Yep. We looked at Full Circle Insight. We looked at Bright Edge, Bright Funnel, I believe. Yes, yep. Bright Funnel. Yep. So those were the shortlisted providers. Sure.
For a company with budget dollars that are allocated and or the budget is shrunk, where would you recommend companies start with developing attribution if scale and budget are real concerns?
That's a great question. So in fact, I was working with a company that was a startup, and I was doing consulting with them, and they had a similar problem where they didn't have a huge amount of dollars to go invest in technology buying. But then, when I was doing consulting, I said, why don't we do a POC? Why don't we start a small niche case? And I talked to Visible, and I said, hey, I'm working with this company, and then would you help me? And they were like, yeah, we're more than happy to help. And we did a very small POC, very, very cost effectively. We started implementing them for a small set of the data. And we implemented in Salesforce and implemented our digital websites. And that's how we were able to show the value of the different marketing campaigns they were. And then when the owners saw the value, they were like, this is really exciting. I was not able to see and put the lens that we're able to do now. So I'm going to go and invest in more dollars. So I always recommend the POC concept, and it's worked really well. It doesn't matter, like I've worked at IBM, worked at small startups. It worked really well if you start with a POC instead of full-scale implementation.
All right.
Any other questions?
What
Good catch.
about, I know, I was impressed with myself. I'm tall, I did not play volleyball or basketball. I work for a very, very conservative credit union who does not like the cloud or putting member data in the cloud because of, risk of security and things like that. And I am like dying to do marketing automation and things like this. And so is there a way to, I know it would be a lot of like manual process work, but how can, similar to her question, but in that case where you can't put member or customer information into a cloud to really follow them, how could we like dip our toes into something like this to show value?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, there was one example that I recently came across where they had a very similar scenario where they didn't want to put anything in the cloud. They were just cloud skeptic, even though they're a large organization. So for them, after doing some research, I found out they're putting all of their data into SQL databases. And in fact, everything is going to SQL. They do have the basic digital analytics platform. So my recommendation to them was, since they already have digital analytics platform, they're generating user IDs for those in their digital analytics, try to do an in-house exercise. They had the luxury of having internal analysts who can go do exercise, so they didn't necessarily want to invest and go with the third-party provider. So one of the exercises that I recommended them is to stitch the journey of their digital visitors with what they have in SQL. So they have an order ID, they had a shopper ID, they have a unique identifier for people who are visiting the website, and then some of that data is connected to their SQL database. So the exercise is going to be painful because now you have to go do manually, but it's possible. Like, having dealt with multi-touch attribution for almost like 4 years now, I could see, in the back of my head, I could think about like how they're stitching the journey. It's all based on a unique identifier. That could be an email, a unique ID of some sorts. So that would be my recommendation. Sure.
Hold on.
I hope this question isn't too niche, but coming from the other side of it, I put on events, and I'm always trying to show value to our people that display or our sponsors. Was there anything that the trade shows did that helped you with your attribution model? Did they give you like a list of emails, or what would be valuable from that side to help you get that offline marketing into your being able to attribute it?
Yeah, so we got, if you look at the trade show, there are multiple things that if we go to a third-party trade show, depending on how big or small they are, if they're larger, like we do reInvent, so obviously Amazon's not going to give us all the list of the people unless the people who attend our booth. So we only got the list of people who attended the booth. But if there are smaller trade shows, we got the list of all the people that came to visit that trade show, even though they may not have attended our booth. So what we did is we used the response status in Salesforce. So essentially what you, and you may be very familiar with this, basically you say anyone who attended the booth is response status yes, and anyone who did not attend it is not responded. So what Visible does, it uses the response status to decide on where to give credit or not. So you can decide like, okay, 100 people I got a list, out of those 10 people attended, I want to grab all of them in Salesforce, but I don't want to necessarily give them touch points because I didn't have a conversation with them at the booth. So use the response status yes, you assign say Visible, only go touch point for the ones that attended the booth. So that's how we do it.
So was that manually, you took the business cards and then went into Salesforce and did it, or was there a way to automate that?
No, we use an app called Attend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we were doing that before we started using the app. We were doing manual processes. We were using Excel spreadsheets and all. So what Attend did this for is like it automated, directly infuses all data in Salesforce, so we don't have to work. But even now, we're still doing manual process for some events because they don't allow other third-party apps to be used at their booths since it's a third party that we're dealing with. So we still get an Excel spreadsheet at the end. So, the least case that we're like, hey, let's just at least get the Excel spreadsheets. And when they come to the booth, we have our iPad app so that we actually make them fill out a form.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Great, thank you so much. This is how you can reach out if you have any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much.